We're going to start a new chapter. This is the biological aspect of psychology. We're going to talk about all the stuff that we talk about all the time. What's a neuron? What's the nervous system? But we're going to start out with the cells. There's two different types of cells in the world. There's prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. We are made up of eukaryotic cells, all of us. We all have organelles, we all have a nuclei in each of our cells, and it builds on each other. A prokaryotic cell can survive on its own. That's what all your viruses and all of your bacteria are, prokaryotic cells. Now the interesting thing is, and we didn't really realize this until the HIV virus. With the HIV virus, we didn't understand how their DNA really worked. We knew it was in there, but we had never had to even think about it before. But what happens is the HI virus is human immunovirus, I guess. Will inject a piece of its DNA into a T cell, and it will change the DNA of that T cell so that it can't identify any negative things. And that's how it works. The DNA is just kind of free floating in here, but if you look at a human cell or any cell that is eukaryotic, it's a very structured DNA. It always has structured DNA. So all the cells in all of our bodies are the same. They have the same DNA structure. And when the prokaryotic HI virus injects its DNA into our T cells, what it does, it changes our T cells so that they become non-functional. Then we can't fight off diseases. And that's why HIV kills us. The prokaryotic cell has no nucleus, it has no organelles. It has unbound DNA that circulates in the cell, as weird as that is. These are tiny little guys. These are not very large cells. They're only about 5 microns. The cell division is by binary fission, so they just split in half. Eukaryotic cells do have a nucleus, they do have organelles. The DNA is in a linear structure in the nucleus, and of course they're all the same. Every single cell has the same DNA. These are relatively large. They're 8 times larger than the largest prokaryotic cell. And the cell division is by mitosis, which is different. Which one is faster, binary fission or mitosis? Binary fission is much, much faster. One of the jobs I had when I was a laboratory technician was growing bacteria, and by golly, those bacteria would grow really, really, really fast, which was kind of exciting because then we could identify them. If we could grow them, we can identify them, and that's what we had to do. The human body contains 10 trillion cells. There are 200 specialized types of cells. The vast majority of the cells in the human body are one of 2 types. They're either epithelial cells, which are skin cells. Now the strange thing about skin cells is you think you've got them all over the outside of your body. That's true. But you also have them on the inside of your body. All the organs, all the surfaces of all your organs are made up of epithelial cells. So when we were doing urinalysis, once upon a time, 1 million years ago when I was in the service, when I was doing urinalysis, I would see epithelial cells in people's urine. And the reason I did see those epithelial cells was because they were epithelial cells from the bladder, from the urethra, and just from the urethra. The epithelial cells make up all your glands, they make up all the surfaces of everything, and they also make up all your glands. The second large type of cell is connective tissues, your bones and your tendons, and those are all made of connective tissue. If you've ever heard of lupus erythematosus, it is a inflammation of your connective tissue. It's a breakdown of your connective tissue. And that's the reason, if you've ever seen anybody with lupus, they had a butterfly pattern on their faces. It's because the connective tissue in their face was breaking down. One of the reasons that when you get old, you get all wrinkly is because your connective tissue is breaking down. So you get wrinkles. Something my wife complains about all the time. Not my wrinkles, but her wrinkles. Guess she doesn't care about mine. She doesn't care about me. She just cares about herself. Anyway, she complains that she's getting all wrinkly.
How can you love me when I'm so wrinkly?
That's what she says. And I tell her when I look at her, I don't see her wrinkles. I see the sweet person that she is. It never works. I could use all the lines in the world, and my wife's just too smart for me. The human body contains about 30 trillion bacteria. So the reality is, this is all the cells we have in our body. The rest of our body is made up of bacteria. I know, it's known as a biome. We are our bacteria. So because I'm from Indiana, because I've been to different countries in the world and I've eaten all kinds of odd foods, because I've lived in Oklahoma and Texas and Montana and Mississippi and Washington, D.C. and where else have I been? Nebraska, California. Because I've lived in all these different places, my body's bacteria isn't the same as yours. I don't eat the same foods that you eat, potentially. You are made up of Miss Vicky's potato chips. Yeah, Miss Vicky's potato chips, okay. Salt and vinegar, that's my favorite. I like salt and vinegar. Okay, so we are made up of our own bacteria, in essence. So if we took a sampling of your bacteria, you would have very similar bacteria in your gut that you would have in your mouth, that you would have in your anus. Of course, your biome would be totally different than mine. So we all have different reactions to things because of our bacteria. The bacteria also protect us. This is a good thing, that your bacteria are protecting you from more virulent bacteria or potentially more virulent viruses. In the Wuhan virus, the coronavirus that is exploding in the Wuhan province of China, which is right in the middle of China, that coronavirus it isn't killing everybody. It's not infecting everybody. People are coming in contact with it, but they're not getting infected by it because their bacteria is protecting them. That's the way it works, potentially. So we need all the good bacteria we can get. Just a thought. We collect information from our environment and react to it in the information gathered by specialized cells called neurons. Sensory neurons collect information from the environment. The interneurons can communicate between the neurons. Motor neurons communicate with muscles and glands, and that's how we move and how I can move my arm or whatever. It's because of my motor neurons. If it was the light was too bright in here, I would close my eyes a little bit. I'd squint my eyes. How would I do that? The sensory neurons would collect the information telling me the light's too bright. The interneurons would tell my spinal cord that it needed to tell the motor neurons to squint my eyes. And then I would squint. That's how it works. If enough motor neurons, neurotransmitters cross the synaptic cleft, is that right? Huh. If enough neurotransmitter cross the synaptic cleft, the neuron will be stimulated to fire. Neurons have only one intensity. They either fire or they don't. And this is one of the reasons why when you have pain, you have pain. You have intense pain. You don't have a little bit of pain. You don't have kind of a pain. It's almost just about this. It's almost just about that. You either have pain or you don't.
With that, do people have certain responses to that? Like it's slower, like their neurons are just much slower than other people?
Right.
Like respond to pain?
Yeah, and we can talk about boys and girls if you like. Women are less sensitive to pain than men are. But then again, men never give birth to babies. Yeah, okay. Yes, so some people are more sensitive to pain than others. Some individuals are number than others. As you get older, sensitivity to pain decreases. You become less sensitive to pain. We become numb as we get old, as weird as that is. And this is one of the reasons why kids will react to pain one way and, grandma will react another way. My grandson, it was about 1.5 years old when he met his grandmother. And he was playing with a ball. Well, he wasn't even that old. He was probably 1 year old. Anyway, he was playing with a baseball. And he can throw it really pretty good. And he clocked her right in the forehead. My mother, he hit her in the forehead with a baseball. And of course, it should have hurt. I mean, getting hit in the head with a baseball hurts. Whether you're batting, or whether it's a 90-mile-per-hour fastball or just a 20-mile-per-hour throw by my grandson. Anyway, clocked her right in the forehead. And she didn't even wince. It didn't even bother her. She's pretty old. She was 98 at the time. She died, I don't know, 4 or 5 months later. But she didn't even respond to it. And everybody's going, "Oh my God, he killed Grandma."
Oh my God.
It did, and she laughed. She was just laughing. She thought it was funny. Of course, she'd had 6 kids, so compared to giving birth, yeah, hitting the head with a baseball doesn't mean a whole lot. Neurons have only one intensity. They either fire or they don't. When a neuron fires, the neurotransmitter stimulation must reach the threshold level to make the neuron fire. And this is a problem with drugs. When we take drugs, the first time we take them, wow, we get a pretty good blast. But after that, our neurons become less sensitive to that substance. It's a psychoactive substance. It becomes less sensitive to it. So the next time we take the same amount of stuff, we're not going to have the same reaction. It's going to be less. It's going to be half. It's not going to be nearly as strong a response as we had the first time. And if we don't up the dosage, then the next time we take it, we're not going to have hardly any response at all. So we have to continue to increase the dosage. And the reason for that is that the human body tries to balance everything. And all drugs are toxins. They're poisons. And that's the reason you have a reaction to it. And since they're toxins, one of the things that our body is doing, it's trying to protect us from that toxin. So it downregulates a number of receptor sites so that cell, that neuron, won't die. If there's too much of that toxin, then the neuron will die. It won't be functional anymore. So the human body tries to protect itself, and it protects itself by lowering its sensitivity to that toxin. So we're constantly in this state of flux where we're trying to balance everything. If I eat too much sugar for lunch, my body will make me less sensitive to sugar so that I won't become diabetic. That's what my body does. My body does the same thing with depression, or with schizophrenia, or with anxiety. My body tries to balance that. It doesn't want to be sick. It wants to be normal. So it will make it so that I don't have that strong a reaction to it. Just the way it works. We do the same thing with alcohol, and this is why you build up a tolerance to alcohol. The tolerance that you are building up is your body trying to protect itself from that alcohol. At the end of the axon terminal is an open area called a synaptic cleft. Information is passed into the synapse through chemicals called neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters cross the synaptic cleft and attach themselves to docking stations that only react to the neurotransmitter's chemical configuration. If enough neurotransmitter docks at the receptor sites, it will affect the properties of the receiving neuron. And so that's how they fire. You get enough neurotransmitter, it makes it fire. And then it works. So what do we need to take? What are we taking? Oh, we're taking serotonin. So that we're taking SSRI so that we are depressed. So we need to be undepressed, and so the doctor gives us selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. and it increases our serotonin level. And now we're happy. We're not happy. Now we're happy. Some neurotransmitters make it more likely that the neuron will fire, and these are known as excitatory neurotransmitters. Some neurotransmitters are both excitatory and inhibitory. Serotonin is that way. In one portion of your brain, it's excitatory, and in another portion of your brain, it's inhibitory. Other neurotransmitters make it less likely that a neuron will fire, and this is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. One of the major inhibitory neurotransmitters in our bodies, in our brains, is GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid. That's important because if we don't have enough of this stuff, we become overly anxious. We become paranoid. We become scared of things. Often, both inhibitory and excitatory neurotransmitters are working on the same neuron at the same time. The neuron will be more or less likely to fire depending on which neurotransmitter is stimulated. There are billions of neurons and trillions of synapses in the nervous system, most of which are in our brains because we are so brilliant. Remember that. Write that down. Brilliant. We are brilliant. There are two major parts of the nervous system: the central nervous system, which is your brain and your spinal column, and all the rest of the nerves. That's your peripheral nervous system. Peripheral just means outside. Central nervous system means in the middle. So our spinal column and our brain, right there. I adopted a cat, and it was starving to death, and you could almost see its spinal column and its brain. It was so skinny. Don't worry about it. He's fine now. He's becoming more amorous. He's starting to chase my female cat. He's a male cat. Yeah, so I know. So I'm feeding him for 2 weeks, and nothing's happening. All of a sudden, he ate enough food. Now he's feeling his beans or something. So now he's chasing this cat all over the house. It's kind of interesting. She hates cats. She hates other cats. So we'll see what happens. The peripheral nervous system, she's going to kill him, I think. The peripheral nervous system is divided into the autonomic nervous system, which links the central nervous system to your heart, your intestines, and other internal organs, and the somatic nervous system, nerves that carry messages from the sensory organs, the eyes, the ears, and all your sensory organs. So the somatic nervous system has to do with all your senses coming in, and the autonomic nervous system is all the things that have to work in order for us to stay alive. If you had to think about your heart beating, you'd have to think about your heart beating all the time. And that's all you would be able to do. If you had to think about your intestines digesting food, you'd have to think about it all the time. Well, how do you think about your heart for 1 second in your digestive system? You couldn't do that. So the autonomic nervous system is all the automatic things happening in your body. The autonomic nervous system is divided into two divisions: the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. If you were in a fight or flight situation, then your sympathetic nervous system would kick in. It would increase your heart rate so that you could run away or fight. It would stop your digestion because that takes too much energy away from your body and you need to run away real fast. It stimulates glucose from the liver so that you can run away once again. Your adrenal glands would secrete substances so that you could run away once again. And it would dilate your pupils, as weird as that is. Now, why in the world would your pupils dilate? To take in more of what's happening, so you see things. Now, this is really weird. If you've ever talked to somebody that was in an emergency situation where something happened really, really fast, they say, everything seemed to slow down. Well, what the hell was going on? Why did everything suddenly slow down? Everybody's moving in slow motion. Why is that? The reason is because your eyes have just dilated. You're taking in a lot more information, and your brain is processing that information as if everything was slow. But it's not, of course. Everything's happening at the same speed it always does. It's just that your body is perceiving it a lot slower. So when you think about what happened, you know, you're in a car crash or whatever is going on, when you think about that, it seems like everything slowed down because you're taking in all of this information. And your brain is so brilliant that it's able to process all of that information, even though there are such tiny little pieces of information that need to be processed. That's why everything seems to slow down. And so somebody can ask you, well, what was the color of the car? Well, the color of the car is the last thing you care about. But of course, you have that information in your brain because your eyes have dilated and you've taken in all of the information about what's going on. So you know what the color was. You know what the guy looked like. You know that the guy had his eyes open really wide and his mouth was open. And you could see that he had 2 teeth missing, one over here and one over here. You saw all of this stuff and you took it all in, despite the fact that it all happened in 1 or 2 seconds. But you took in all of this information. That's why your eyes dilate. Isn't that fun? Or you may be one of those people that when something bad happens, you close your eyes and then you don't see anything at all. I've been in these situations. I fell out of a helicopter one time and I did a somersault. I did a somersault while I was flying through. I only fell about 30 feet, but I turned a complete somersault. Now, how in the world did I do that? Try it sometime. Try to turn a complete somersault. It's not like I was bouncing up and down on a trampoline. I had fallen out of a helicopter, and I was scared a lot. The ground looked like it was way far away, and then all of a sudden, I was right there, right where it was. But by that time, I had turned a complete somersault, and I was looking up at the sky, thinking, I can fly, I can fly. I can't fly. I didn't fly. I hit the ground really hard. Luckily, it wasn't cement or water. Water is like cement when you hit it. Okay. And because I turned that somersault, I landed in the right spot. I know. My brain, it took all this information and it told me how to land. I landed on my shoulders, so it didn't hurt me at all, hardly. It killed me, but it didn't hurt me very much. No permanent damage, obviously. So. The human brain weighs about 3 pounds. That's not too much. The brain starts as a swelling at the top of the spinal column. This swelling is the brainstem that regulates most of the functions of the autonomic nervous system. This is your brainstem, and of course it's right here, the little sucker right there. Damage to the brainstem is not a good thing. This is not good. It can stop your heart from beating, it can stop your breathing, it can stop the digestion in your body, and that's because you've injured that portion of your brain. One of the jobs that I had, and this is a god-awful job that nobody wanted, but one of the jobs I had when I was working in the emergency room was we were getting people that were brain dead. And the reason we got them is because we were the ones that maintained their bodies until we could harvest all of their organs. Doesn't that sound macabre? They were dead, but we had to maintain them until we could take all their organs out. We could transplant a heart, transplant kidneys, transplant livers, transplant lungs, transplant anything that needed to be transplanted. So that was our job. We were the ones that maintained them, and then we would send them to different hospitals so that they could transplant. We were here, and down the street were 2 hospitals that transplanted, actually did transplants. So we were able to save, 7, 8 lives from one dead body. Well, one of the problems, let's see, this is in Iowa. One of the problems that they had in Iowa, or the law in Iowa, said that they didn't have to wear helmets if they rode on a motorcycle. Well, the reason you wear a helmet is because if your head is heavy, and if you fall, your head, you can't control your head, and it'll do whatever the hell it wants to do. And usually what it wants to do is move as far back as it possibly can, because it's heavy, and your neck isn't that strong. So what would happen, these guys would fall off motorcycles, fall off the back of the motorcycle, they'd be in a motorcycle accident, and then their skull would press up against their medulla, and they would be brain dead. But everything else was okay. So we kept getting these bodies with these, they were alive when we got them. They were officially dead, okay, but they weren't dead because we were able to put them on life support and keep them until we could harvest all their organs. But it was because they rode on motorcycles without a helmet that we had so many of the motorcycle guys. And these were mostly young guys, so they were all pretty healthy. And if they had, signed that thing on their driver's license that they were going to donate their organs, I know, that sounds horrible, doesn't it? Somebody had to do it. Where do you think these kidneys come from that everybody's transplanting?
So this kind of like makes me think about like individuals that, like you said, they kind of urinate on themselves when they get scared, or they I guess use the restroom on themselves. So does that mean like their brainstem is like injured in some way?
No.
Like when they're scared or something?
Oh, geez, you've never been so scared that you wet yourself?
No, never.
Really? Maybe you've never been in a very frightening situation. Try falling out of a helicopter sometime, flying 30 feet through the air and doing a somersault and landing on the ground. Yes, I wet myself, okay? And it doesn't bother me at all that I wet myself. I would rather wet myself than be dead. Anyway, I was scared a lot. I would say shitless, but that's completely inaccurate. Anyway, sometimes you get scared. Go ahead and pee, that's okay. It's fine. When people die, they pee anyway. They relax their sphincters, so things come out. A blow to the medulla can prove to be fatal, equally fatal, and of course if you've ever seen, James Bond do a judo chop to the back of somebody's neck, what he's doing, he's hitting the medulla and he's killing them by chopping the back of their neck. It's a judo chop. These guys are breaking bricks with their hands, so you can imagine if they're hitting somebody in the back of the head. Yeah, it's a judo chop. It's right below the skull. That's where you hit them. Not that I would ever do that. You can see my hand's not that hard. Equally fatal is an overdose of opiates, which may stop the individual from breathing and slow their heart to the point of arrest. Above the medulla is a widening area known as the pons. The pons regulates your sleep, your breathing, your swallowing, your bladder control. Okay, a blow to that portion of your neck will make you urinate. I know. But I was scared. I can tell you right now, I was scared. Equilibrium, taste, eye movement, facial expressions, and posture, and that has to do with the medulla. Running through the brainstem is a series of fibers that makes up a structure known as the reticular formation. The reticular formation is really kind of fun, because if you've got kids and your kid starts crying at 2 o'clock in the morning, of course there's always an argument as to who's going to get up. Both you and your significant other are awake, but there's always a question is who's going to get up. But both of you are awake, and the reason you're both awake is because your reticular formation has awakened you, even from the deepest sleep you can possibly imagine. And that's the job of the reticular formation. The reticular formation prioritizes incoming information, and of course what could be more important to anybody than that their child has a problem and needs to be taken care of. Of course, if you've got a significant other, they probably are pretending that they didn't wake up. The bastard. But they're awake just like you are, okay? It's not a male-female thing. Women don't wake up better than men do. My son was breastfed by my wife. And my wife would, if he started crying for food in the middle of the night, she wouldn't get up. I got up. And what I would do, and this is a horrible, horrible thing, and don't hate me for it, but what I would do, I would bring the baby to bed, and I would attach him to my wife's breast. Because otherwise I had to heat up some milk otherwise. And of course, she slept through it anyway, because she's that kind of a person.
What?
It's not the worst thing in the world. I've done worse things.
What?
She wouldn't get up to feed the baby, and she was breastfeeding. So I would bring the baby to bed, and I would.
Your first wife?
My first wife, of course. And I would attach the baby to my wife's breast. That's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, otherwise, I gotta pull the milk out of the refrigerator, put it in the water, heat the water up. Of course, he's still crying the whole time. He's hungry, he wants to eat. He ate a lot, I'll tell you, there's something going on with that kid. Anyway, that's what I did. Maybe I'm the worst husband in the world. I guess I am the worst husband in the world. Anyway, if you damage this area, you'll go into a coma. Sometimes what will happen if you get a blow to this area, it will cause swelling in the area, and you'll have to wait till the swelling goes down before the individual comes out of their coma. We have medications that we can give you to put you into a coma. And that's a medically induced coma. And sometimes we do that so that the individual will be able to repair.
So what does it do to that part when they put people in a medically induced coma?
No, we're giving them medication that puts them in a coma. So it doesn't have it stimulates this portion. So it puts them into a coma. But it's a chemical. It's a chemically induced coma. Because what we're trying to do is, a lot of times we have brain swelling, and the more activity there is, the more damage that is done. So we'll put them in a chemically induced coma so that they can repair, so all that stuff can repair with as little damage as possible. And that's normally why we do it. Why they do it. It's not like they call me up on the phone and say, okay, if you put this guy into a coma, sure, go ahead. What the hell? Let's see if it fixes it. But one of the problems is edema. Edema is, let's say that you sprained your ankle and it swelled up. Well, some of that fluid in there is blood. Some of that fluid is cerebral fluid. And the reason your body does it is to immobilize your ankle because it's injured. So if it stays swollen for an extended length of time, usually that's edema. That is not blood, it's just cerebral fluid to immobilize, to keep it immobilized. Well, we can't allow that fluid to stay on there for an extended length of time because it tends to break down tissue. It tends to destroy tissue. So what we'll do is try to reduce the amount of swelling so that there's less damage done. So if you messed up your knee, you twisted your knee and you've got a lot of fluid in your knee, one of the things that the doctor would want to do is draw some of that fluid, draw the fluid off. See it, Denise? So that you didn't have any damage to your knee. If it stays there for an extended length of time, it's going to break your knee down. It's going to make your tendons weaker. So we have to draw some of that fluid off.
So what is the difference between somebody being in a coma and somebody being brain dead?
If somebody's in a coma, there's still brain activity. If somebody's brain dead, it means they have no brain activity.
So are they either in a coma or if they're brain dead, are they able to feel pain?
They don't react to pain. So I'm guessing that means they don't feel pain. Okay.
So in induced coma and in a coma, they're both the same thing?
If you go into a coma because you have a blow to your reticular activating system, yeah, that's a coma. Okay. But if we induce you in a coma, okay, that means that we have put a chemical in your body to activate this reticular activating system. Okay. Sure. If you're in a coma, we don't know when you're coming out. If we have put you in a coma, we can bring you out anytime we want. So we'll leave you in the coma until potentially the swelling goes down. A lot of it has to do with swelling. The swelling will cause damage. And we want as little damage as possible.
With the medulla, when somebody suffers a stroke, is that the part of the brain that's affected, or is it just? 'Cause it
No, it's
has-
usually the cerebrum. It's usually the rest of the body that has been affected. On the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. Okay. So it's usually up in here. It doesn't have anything to do with the brain stem.
Okay.
Okay. It's an aneurysm, it's a hemorrhage, which is a breaking of the blood vessel, creating bleeding into the area. If the blood stays there and for an extended length of time, if you're bleeding into your brain and we allow it to sit there for an extended length of time, it will break up, it will destroy that portion of your brain. That's one of the reasons why we go in and try to draw the fluid off, the blood or the cerebral fluid. There's not a whole lot of room in there.
So with brain hemorrhages and those kinds of things, just generally like people that die from those type of things, is there usually symptoms that can, I guess, prevent that before it's too late to where, because I know that there's a lot of people that can live with those kinds of things, then all of
Sure.
a sudden it just happens and then they
Right.
die. So are there signs or symptoms before it gets that
Right.
bad?
Okay. Stroke is caused by one of three things. It's either caused by a bleeding in your brain, a hemorrhage,
Uh-huh.
or it's caused by a clot in your brain, which blocks blood getting into to take care of your brain, or it's an aneurysm, which is another word for a hemorrhage, because it's a ballooning of the blood vessel, and it bursts, and then there's a large bleed out. Normally, if you have a brain aneurysm, you die fairly quickly because it's relatively extensive. If it's a hemorrhage, sometimes it's just a leakage, and you'll get small strokes. You'll have small strokes. As the pressure increases in a certain area, you'll lose something, like movement of your right arm. Movement of your right arm, you can't speak very well. Your lips stop working very well. So you'll have these small scale hemorrhages or strokes. So you lose just little pieces of things. But if you have a blood clot, it kills that portion of your brain. Whatever that blood vessel feeds, that's the portion of your brain that you lose. So it really all depends on how extensive something is. A lot of times when you have a hemorrhage, if it's large enough, you'll die. But most strokes are caused by blood clots. About 70% are caused by blood clots. So it doesn't have to affect a large portion of your brain. It usually affects, if it's over here, it affects your right side. If it's over here, it affects your left side. So you can do things to yourself that make you more likely to have a stroke. Smoking cigarettes makes your platelets sticky, and so you're more likely to have a blood clot someplace. You can have it in your kidneys, you can have it in your lungs, you can have it in your legs, you can have it in your brain. If it's in your brain, it's a stroke. Snorting cocaine, another thing that really screws people up. There's a lot of stupid things that you can do to yourself. So when we hear about these guys that are in their 60s, these rockers that are in their 60s, David Bowie all of a sudden dies of a stroke. Gee, I wonder why. Could it be that all that cocaine that he snorted? Or when we hear of Linda Ronstadt developing Parkinson's disease, gee, could it have something to do with all this cocaine she snorted?
Isn't that kind of like recently, like with Ozzy?
Ozzy's got Parkinson's disease, that's right. Yeah, geez, I wonder if he ever snorted cocaine. What do you think? We know he's chewing the heads off of bats, but is he, I don't think he really did that. But is he snorting cocaine afterwards, or shooting up with heroin? I mean, a lot of these things are very, very destructive. They're all toxins, and you really should not put them in your system. But the reason people put them in their system is because they're trying to forget, they're trying to be happy, there's a lot of really good reasons to use drugs. but it may accelerate your life and you may die younger than you would have if you hadn't. But luckily, maybe you should have lived to be 115 and now you'll only live to be 97, you know. So we won't worry about that.
Still a pretty good run.
Yeah, not a bad run. I'm hoping for 98, that's what I'm hoping for. And I've been a good boy almost all my life. I've been a really good boy almost all my life. Been a pretty good boy. A lot. Above the brainstem is a fairly large structure that has less purpose than it was first thought. This is the thalamus. You can see it's a big chunk of meat. It's a big chunk of meat right in the middle of your brain. Well, we thought that it was a really important piece of meat, but as it turns out, it's not that important. All it does is guide information into different portions of your brain. It has to do, it orders things. It tells things what's more important and what's less important. So it would be your thalamus. Remember we had that accident and we saw all this stuff coming in? Well, your thalamus would tell you to remember this and not remember that or whatever. But the reality is you took all that into your system. You took it all into your brain. This is one of the reasons why everything slowed down. So your vision, your hearing, your taste, and your touch, it orders all the things that are coming in. Okay, so let's say that what do you want to eat? Coca-Cola, you want to drink Coke. So you decide you're going to drink Coke, and you open the bottle of Coke, and you put it up to your mouth to drink it. Well, the first thing you do is smell what's coming out of the Coke, right? You smell it. Yes, you do. Sure you do. The thing is, you're not paying attention. Why? Because your thalamus is telling you not to smell anything. It's telling you not to worry about that portion of it. You're just thinking, I'm thirsty and I need a drink. So you're not really smelling what it smells like. You are, but you're not paying any attention to it. Okay. A lot of times I'll eat food, and if I smell it before I put it in my mouth, I go, oh God, this stinks. Oh my God, I hope it doesn't taste as bad as it smells, and that's your palate. That's your palate. But the thalamus is the one that tells you not to smell it, just to taste it. And not to try to taste different things in it. You know, sometimes meat doesn't taste all that good. It tastes like blood. It does. But see,
Is your meat
you put all that salt and pepper and the gravy on it, and so what you're really tasting is you're tasting this mixture, this amalgamation of tastes. But your brain is telling you, don't taste that salt, don't taste that pepper, don't taste that gravy, don't taste that meat because it tastes like blood. So you're just kind of putting it all together, and then you're saying, oh, this tastes really good. Don't smell anything before you eat it. You won't eat anything, especially processed food. Oh, God. Don't smell anything. It all stinks. So if you drink the Coke, what does it smell like when you first open the bottle? It's got carbonated water in it, so you're smelling the carbonation. Well, that's a chemical smell. It smells like it's, lighter fluid or something. Try it sometime. Next time you drink a Coke, now tastes like lighter fluid. I just ruined everybody's appetite. You'll never eat anything again. The cerebellum is the second largest structure of the brain after the cerebrum. You can see it's right down here. This is another thing you don't want to hit with your skull. Your skull actually protects it. It comes right down here, and it would, if the blow came, it would hit right there, and that's why you go into a coma. That's why you become brain dead. You can't breathe on your own. Your heart stops beating, and so we have to put you on life support. Now, if as long as this is not damaged, as long as it's just bruised, we can probably bring you back if we put you on life support. But if it's been damaged, there's not a whole lot we can do. We can't repair your brain stem. We can't do it. And you'll die.
So I wonder if there was a lot of injuries like this, like a long time ago, is like, when people used to play football, they just had like that leather.
That leather helmet?
Yeah.
Yes, there were. As a matter of fact, when Teddy Roosevelt was president, they, remember, the only people playing football at this time were college kids, or that almost hardly anybody else is playing football. And we're, all of our best and our brightest were sending them out on the football field, and they were having all these brain injuries. We had all these deaths. So they, in 1906, they had to decide whether they were going to allow football to exist or not to exist. We were about to, he was about to outlaw it. And at that point, they started putting different structures. They didn't wear helmets at all before 1906. Then after 1906, they put the leather helmet on. Then they put padding in the leather helmet. Then it became harder, you know. They didn't want to use anything. They didn't want to put a steel helmet on anybody because then they would spear somebody and kill them. So, yeah, I know. Smash mouth football they talk about. For the longest time, they didn't have a face piece that came
Well, it
across.
doesn't have to be so aggressive. There's like touch football, flag football. Those are safer ways.
Rugby.
Mhm.
No.
Just don't do it.
I'm too small to play football anyway, thank God. The cerebellum is the second largest structure. Okay, we talked about that before. The cerebellum is the back of the brain and is the major contributor to voluntary muscle maintenance and plays a part in memory. This is kind of fun because when you get drunk, if you've, of course none of you have ever had anything to drink, but if you'd ever tried drinking, the first thing that really messes you up is the fact that your reasoning portion of your brain gets stupid and it stops functioning. So you just keep drinking. And it walks its way back. So slowly it's moving all the way back to your cerebellum. Your cerebellum has something to do with movement. So as it's walking its way back, you get stupid, you think you can dance. I know. Drunk people are so funny when they dance. You get violent because it affects your amygdala. Some people get really mean and violent when they get drunk. Other mean people get really nice when they're drunk, and you think, wow, he's really a nice guy. And then the next time you see him, he punches you in the face. The only fights I've ever had were with drunk people. For some ungodly reason, I had a guy hit me in the forehead with a beer bottle. It was one of those big beer bottles. Budweiser, just crack, popped me right in the head. It was a backhand. And evidently he played tennis because he hit me good. And he hit me right in the forehead. So if you think anything's wrong with me, it probably has to do more with that beer bottle that hit me in the head. And he was drunk. He hit me in the head and then he dropped the bottle and he was cursing me because he dropped the bottle and broke his... It was full of beer. I mean, he hadn't opened it yet. He just cracked me in the forehead. Anyway, I told you about my friend that stabbed me. I was trying to stop it.
Who are you hanging out with?
I'm sorry?
I said, who are you hanging out with?
My friends, okay? These are my friends. Except the guy that hit me in the forehead, I didn't know him from anybody. But the guy that stabbed me was my friend. He was a Cajun. I don't know if that has anything to do with anything. Have you ever known any Cajuns? Those guys from Louisiana?
No.
They speak French. Oh, jeez, what an ass. I mean, most of the time he was the nicest guy in the world. Put a couple beers in him and all of a sudden he's just Mr. Violence. And he was a skinny little guy. I mean, he was my height and he weighed half as much as I do, and all of a sudden he just stabbed me. It wasn't fun at all. What are we doing? Body balance. Okay, so we're getting drunk, and so the last thing that happens, the more you drink, of course, all of a sudden you're stupid, and then you can't dance, and then all of a sudden you can't walk. You know, you can barely walk, and your hands don't work anymore. And of course, now you think, of course, your reasoning portion's gone, so you'll get in your car to drive, right? You can unlock it, because that key doesn't really work very well. Fobs are the worst thing for drunks, because they will unlock the car without having any muscle coordination. Anyway, so that's the last thing that happens. And then you pass out. Okay. You're going to go get a Coke, aren't you? Body balance, coordinates your voluntary muscle movement, memory, language, cognition. Don't try to draw a picture of when you're drunk. That won't work. You can barely drive. You can barely see. Your eyes go out. It's really crazy. Damage to the cerebellum can cause poor muscle tone and tremors. Children with ADHD and dyslexia. Now this is really kind of bizarre. They have a smaller than average cerebellum, but we're not exactly sure if it's because they have a small cerebellum, if that is causing their ADHD and dyslexia, or because they have ADHD and dyslexia, it is causing their cerebellum to be smaller. We're not exactly sure which one is the cause and which one is the effect. What we need to do is we need to look at their cerebellum before we find out if they are dyslexic or have ADHD. That's what we really need to do. In the middle of the brain is the limbic system, the amygdala, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, the septal area. These structures, it's right in the middle of your brain. These structures play an important role in emotions, especially your sexual arousal, your aggression, and your pain. The amygdala, which is Latin for almond, is located at the end of the hippocampus, and it appears to control aggression and other emotions. So if we stimulate the amygdala, you'll have an emotional reaction, whether it's anger or you'll get unhappy. But the amygdala is what controls your level of violence. The hippocampus, hippo means horse and campus means sea. I know. Means seahorse. It looks like a seahorse. This is it. This is it right here. This purple thing. It kind of looks like a seahorse. It's involved in spatial orientation, learning, and memory. So the hippocampus is extremely important as far as memory is concerned. It is the hippocampus that is affected when you smoke pot. One of the things we've discovered, if you smoke pot regularly for an extended length of time, that your hippocampus will be as small as 13% smaller than it would have been, or than normal, 13%.
So once that part is like damaged, can it reverse itself? Or is it just that way?
It's gone. Good job. You're broken. Okay. Damage to the hippocampus causes anterograde amnesia, where the individual can't form new memories, and this is forever. Sorry. I wish that we could repair it, but there's nothing we can do. Once upon a time, I was playing soccer, and this British goalie hit me, and he ruptured my spleen. And when they went in, they tried to leave a portion of my spleen in there. They wanted to do that, but they couldn't find a piece big enough to leave in there, because it will regenerate. Your spleen will regenerate. It doesn't work this way in your brain. Things don't regenerate in your brain. Sorry. You will create new neurons, but organs will not regenerate. It's just not the way it works.
So what organs in our bodies can regenerate besides the spleen and then the liver?
Your liver will repair itself. But if you lose half your liver, you only got half a liver. It'll never grow back. If you lose half your brain, which happens sometimes, if you lose half of your brain, it will never regenerate. However, the other portion of your brain will make up for that, the fact that you're missing half your brain.
Have you seen that picture of that guy that he's like his head smashed in, he's missing like a portion of his brain?
Yeah.
But he's still able to function.
Oh, sure.
But like literally he has like no brain. Like
Right.
his skull is smashed.
Right. What happens if you damage a portion of your brain? The rest of your brain will make up for the missing portion, the missing part. It's kind of like males and their testicles. If a male loses one of his testicles, he will start producing enough sperm with his single testicle to be able to impregnate somebody. Sometimes we have extra vestigial, well, they're not really vestigial, we just have extra parts. We don't really need 2 kidneys, but if we lose one, the other kidney will start functioning as if it were doing double duty. So we have portions of our body, we have duplications. And that's okay, that's good, that's a good thing. We needed those because sometimes we get hit in the head, sometimes our kidneys stop functioning, a kidney will stop functioning. So we need that. Remember, the human body is always trying to survive. So if we have to shut one part down so that the other part can function, then we will do that. Because we're brilliant, or whatever. So unfortunately, if you damage your hippocampus, it will not come back, and you'll have anterograde amnesia for the rest of your life, which is no fun at all. A structure that is sandwiched between the thalamus and the pituitary gland is the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is a fascinating organ. It's just a tiny chunk of meat. As you can see, the thalamus is like 4 times bigger than it is, but this is the most important organ in your body. This tells you when you're hungry, it tells you when you're thirsty, it controls your body temperature, it gives you your sexual behavior, it has to do with, it maintains your metabolism, and it tells you when you're happy. That's kind of important. Now the interesting thing about the hypothalamus and sex is that it is testosterone in your hypothalamus that gives you your sex drive, both males and females. Doesn't really matter whether you're a boy or a girl, no matter how much testosterone. If you watch certain television shows, they'll tell you that you have free testosterone and you have real testosterone. You have free-floating testosterone. Well, the free-floating testosterone has to do with with your sex drive, and both males and females have the same testosterone, free-floating testosterone. Now, as it turns out, if males and female, if a male had high levels of testosterone in his hypothalamus, he would be hypersexual. But we have a substance in our brains that control the testosterone level, and that is your serotonin level. It's serotonin that will regulate this. Now, the amazing thing about humans, if you wander around the world and take blood samples of everyone, one of the things you'll find out is that their testosterone will be almost the same, all males, I'm talking about males now. Their testosterone will be almost the same, and their serotonin level will be just about the same. So if you go to Germany, they're not hypersexual. If you go to Japan, they're not hypersexual. If you go to South Africa, they're not hypersexual. The Dinka aren't hypersexual. The natives in the Amazon Valley are not hypersexual. It doesn't matter where you are, they all have almost the same testosterone level. They have almost the same serotonin level controlling their aggressive behavior from their testosterone. Why is that? It's because we have evolved that way. We have evolved so that if all men were so hypersexual that they were rapists, we wouldn't survive as a species. So the ones that survived to reproduce were the ones that could live in a social situation. The ones that were hypersexual were either killed or driven out of the group, and they weren't able to reproduce. So, and humans have only been around for, I don't know, 400,000 or 500,000 years. In different forms, a couple million years. But as we are, we've only been around for about 400,000 years. So the reality is that the bad guys, the really horrible people, were burped out of the gene pool. They're gone. So everybody has just about the same testosterone and serotonin level. As weird as that is. Anyway, that has to do with your sexual behavior. The cerebellum represents 80% of the human brain. However, despite its sheer volume, the part that makes us the intellectual giants that we are, there we go, we're intellectual giants again, is just the 3 millimeters of the surface mass, the cerebral cortex. So it's just the surface of your brain is the most brilliant portion of your brain. That's all you need. If the rest of it were spooned out, then it wouldn't make any difference. We'd still be as smart as we are. So it's the outer covering of your brain that makes you so smart. The cerebral cortex is divided into 4 distinct lobes. The frontal lobe is in the front and controls routine thought, reasoning, and voluntary movement. The parietal lobe starts about halfway back and collects and controls sensory information, especially from your skin. So this is the frontal lobe right in the front. The parietal lobe is right here. The occipital lobe is in the back. It has to do with processing visual information. Strangely enough, it is the closest area, the closest brain mass to your optic nerves. The temporal lobe is on the side of your brain in the ear region, and it processes sound. So sound is near your ears, the vision is in the back of your head, your thinking portion is in the front, and the movement is on the top of your head. Now, if you've ever watched a football game and somebody had a concussion in the football game, you see him talking to the guy and trying to get him to react to them. One of the things they do is they'll hold up a number of fingers, 2 or 3 or whatever, and they'll ask him, how many fingers am I holding up? And the reason is because if he's had a blow to his head and he's damaged this portion of his brain, then he won't be able to see, or he'll have double vision. And that's usually what happens with somebody with a concussion. They'll have double vision, and instead of 3 fingers, they won't be able to count them. They'll go 4, 5, I see, you know. They won't be able to tell how many fingers you're holding up. The other thing is that if they've had a blow to the side of the head, they won't be able to understand what you're talking about. So if you say, how many fingers am I holding up? They'll just see your fingers, but they won't be able to identify what you just said. Another thing you'll ask them is, who's the President of the United States? What's the date? What city are we in? We're trying to get them to reason. We're trying to see if this portion of the brain has been damaged. And of course, when they stand up, we're trying to see if they move adequately or not. If they don't move adequately, they've had a blow to this portion of the head. Now, normally, if we have a blow to the head, it's not to the top. It's usually somewhere on the sides, right? Now, the way the brain works, it is suspended in fluid in there. So, yeah, you've got your skull and you've got your brain, but you've got, it moves around in there. So if you get a blow to the right side of your head, it also hits on the left side of your head. So if you have a blow to the front of your head, it also hits to the back of your head. So, and it can be an equal blow. I mean, if you get a really good blow into the front of your head, then it's an equal blow to the back of your head. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to determine how bad the concussion is, how bad the blow was. Was it such a severe blow that the individual it has damage? That's what we're trying, and this is what, when they talk about the concussion criteria, they're trying to determine whether the individual has damage to that portion of their brains. Like I said, you rarely get hit on the top of the head. It doesn't happen very often. Normally, if you get hit, it's on the side somewhere. So you'll not be able to understand what they're saying. You won't be able to remember what day it is, not to reason who's the President of the United States, or you won't be able to see very well. Football players are goofy. They want to go back in, even if they get hurt. They think they're so important that they have to go back in. So they'll try to cheat, but of course you can't do that. If you see 5 fingers when I'm holding up 3, then you better not go back in, or you'll be trying to catch two balls at the same time and not know where it is, actually. Probably pretty dumb. The parietal lobe contains 2 areas that allow us to perceive our environment and act upon that environment: the motor cortex and the sensory cortex. Sensory cortex, of course, has to do with collecting information from our senses, our touch, our smell, our taste. Except smell, you don't have to worry about it because you don't really pay attention to your smell very much. The motor cortex has to do with movement. The body is able to maintain itself by making minute adjustments to chemicals in the body through the endocrine system. This is really important because if you just had a dinner of cheesecake, one of the things your body needs to do, it needs to process that food as rapidly as it can so that you don't get too much sugar in your system. Normally your body can take in lots and lots of sugar, that's fine, because it tends to be the energy in our systems. So if I gave you, oh geez, we used to do glucose tolerance tests all the time. If I gave you that bottle of Coca-Cola with real sugar in it, not pretend sugar, with sugar in it, of course, that's what, 280 calories in a 20-ounce bottle of Coke? I think it's 280. Okay, that's a lot of calories. So would your sugar go up? Well, no, your body, if your body is functioning properly, your body should be able to take care of all that sugar. And that's one of the things that we need to check. So if somebody has never had diabetes, they can probably take in all the sugar that they want. They don't have to worry about having sugar highs or having hypoglycemia where they crash after they take in a lot of sugar. They shouldn't have that problem. So that was one of my jobs as well. I used to do glucose tolerance tests on people, and normally their glucose would never go up higher than 130 or 140. And then it would go back to normal fairly quickly. In an hour, hour and a half, it'd go back to normal. That's the way it's supposed to work. Patrick, geez, there's something wrong with that guy. He teaches business. Business has to be the most boring thing in the whole wide world. Yeah, he's got like it. I'm telling you, don't take classes from Patrick. He's a business guy. I talk about business ethics with him all the time. It's funny. They have no ethics. Businessmen have no ethics. They just want to rip you off and make a big profit. Well, but we're talking about the endocrine system, so let's talk about the endocrine. I'm just kidding. Patrick's a buddy of mine. He's a pal. He's funny. But his looks don't have anything to do with it. Just no. He's fun. Hypothalamus, of course, that's part of your endocrine system. Pineal gland is right behind your eyes, and it tells you, it collects light, as weird as that is, and it tells you when you go to sleep. Pituitary gland is a master gland in essence, because it controls a lot of other organs. The hypothalamus actually controls the pituitary. Your thyroid has to do with metabolism. It's right behind. Well, you don't have one. Well, Kevin has one. Your voice box is right here, right below your voice box. You guys, females don't have a very large voice box. You probably can't even find it. That's your thyroid gland. Parathyroid glands are inside your thyroid. Adrenal glands are right on top of your kidneys. Your pancreas is right behind your stomach. It's right over here. No, it's right over. Oh, here's your liver, and right below that is your pancreas. Where am I? Reproductive organs. If you're a female, you've got ovaries, and if you're a male, you have testes, and those are your reproductive glands. The endocrine system regulates the body's chemical needs by releasing messengers called hormones. When hormones are secreted, they are carried throughout the body into the circulatory system. Hormones, like neurotransmitters, can either be excitatory or inhibitory. So the endocrine system is controlled with hormones. And hormones are dumped into your blood supply, and then they will function, they will keep dropping your hormones into your system until they have enough, and then they will stop. That's the way it works. So sometimes you get an imbalance. Sometimes you're putting too much hormones into your system. I used to work in a children's hospital, and one of the tests that we drew was cortisol levels. Cortisol has to do with stress, but you dump cortisol into your system twice a day, at 8 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's so that you can wake up and hide from predators at 8 o'clock in the morning, and at 4 o'clock you need to start looking for some place to go to sleep that night. So we dump, everybody does this, it's the weird part. If you're a human, then you dump cortisol at 8 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody does exactly the same thing. So I had to draw cortisol levels on kids that seemed to be overly stressed. And the reason we were doing that is because we were trying to determine if they had a normal cortisol, if they were dumping the right amount of cortisol, or if they were dumping an excess amount of cortisol. And of course, that's one of the tests that we did, was the cortisol level. And it turned out that they were dumping too much cortisol. And that had to do with their pituitary gland, it had to do with their adrenal glands, and so we had to give them medication to try to control that. The pituitary gland secretes hormones that affect other glands. However, the gland that controls the pituitary, of course, is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus tells the pituitary gland to dump the hormones so that it can control other organs in the body. The hypothalamus secretes corticotropin releasing hormone that stimulates the pituitary to release adrenocorticotropic hormone that binds to the adrenal cortex, causing the release of cortisol. So this is ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone is ACTH. This is the hormone that forces the adrenal glands to release cortisol. So that's what was happening with these kids. They were dumping too much ACTH into their system. Now the ugly thing about ACTH is that it is caustic. So if you have too much ACTH, if you're overly stressed, you're in a situation where you have a lot of stress, one of the things that will do is that it will scar your blood vessels. And when it scars your blood vessels, that gives cortisol or cholesterol an opportunity to attach itself to that scar tissue in your blood vessels, and now you have a possibility of a heart attack. Okay. So are heart attacks caused by too much ACTH? Well, potentially it is. So people that are in really high stress situations may potentially have a heart attack unless we control all of these things. This is one of the things how did we discover all of this? Once upon a time in the United States military, we had pilots that were flying airplanes, and they were having heart attacks and the airplanes were crashing. And the United States military, of course, the Air Force didn't care about the pilots. It was the airframes that they were crashing that bothered them a whole lot. So we had to figure out why these pilots were dying of heart attacks. It just wasn't right. We needed to figure out where the heart attacks were coming from. So we looked at their hearts we did autopsies, and we found that their arteries in their hearts were clogging with cholesterol, clogging up with gunk with fat. So then we had to determine how in the world could we tell how much fat these people have in their bodies. So we drew blood on them, and we developed the ability to tell how much cholesterol they had in their bodies, but we were just getting one number. So when we talked about cholesterol, we were just getting one number. Then we realized, wait a minute, there's more than one type of cholesterol. At that point, we fractionated it, and we determined that some of the fat was triglycerides and some of it was cholesterol. So now we've figured out they've got cholesterol and triglycerides. Triglycerides aren't that bad. Triglycerides are just the fat that you produce when you eat your cheeseburger. You're going to have a high triglyceride level for about 12 hours. But the cholesterol is in your system for an extended length of time. And we were able to fractionate that. We were able to determine what was cholesterol and what was triglyceride. So we were doing okay. But we still couldn't figure out who was going to have a heart attack. So we looked at it again, and we determined, wait a minute, that cholesterol, we can fractionate it even more. There's some good cholesterol and some bad cholesterol. Some people had high cholesterol levels, but they were living into their hundreds. Now, wait a minute, this shouldn't happen. If this is the cause, this should be the effect. This person should be dead. They say that to me all the time. You should be dead. It's irritating. When I ruptured my spleen, you should have bled to death. Thank you. I didn't. Anyway, okay, so now we can fractionate this. But one of the things we discovered was there's two different types of cholesterol. There's HDL and LDL. LDL is the small stuff. It's the low-density cholesterol, but it's the stuff that actually clogs your arteries. The HDL is big stuff, and as it's moving through your blood, it's picking up all this, it's picking up LDL. So the more HDL you have in your system, the less likely you are to have a heart attack. So that's where we are today. We've done all of this because all those pilots kept crashing their airplanes. So it's the Air Force that has led this thing. I know.
So is there
Go Air
medication people can take for this?
Yeah, that's what statins are all about.
So what are some ways that somebody could reduce their cholesterol?
Exercise, diet, don't take in the fat. One of the things we realized, back in the 50s when I was a kid, you had bacon and eggs for breakfast every morning. So we thought, then we realized, wait a minute, that's got a lot of cholesterol in it. Duh, that's got a lot of cholesterol in it. So, and we had that for breakfast every morning. My mother fed us bacon and eggs every day because she thought she was creating healthy children. That's what she thought. My dad had bacon and eggs every morning for breakfast. But what she was actually doing was clogging us up with cholesterol. But we didn't clog up with cholesterol because we were so active. So, there are a lot of different factors. Now we can control things with our diets, we exercise more, and all this stuff is really good for you.
So like hearing all of these things, it just makes me realize like how resilient the human body is.
Oh, yeah.
Like that show, My 600-Pound Life, there's people on there that are like 700, 800, 900 pounds. And it's like...
Can you imagine if I tried to gain 500 pounds?
Oh, man.
Where the hell would I put it? I could never do that. You have to be that big. You have to have the bone structure to be able to accumulate all that fat. You have to not exercise. The reality is we're all different gene structures, and some of us are slender and some of us are bigger. My gene structure is, we were coal miners over into Europe. That's why I'm this wide and this tall. And I have feet that are for people that are 7 feet tall. Because we were coal miners. And coal miners needed to be short and squat, like dwarves, okay? So that's my gene structure. And we were farmers, and that's why my feet are so big and fat, wide. Did I say fat? I meant wide. Anyway. So we all have different gene structures. And if you are native, then potentially you have a proclivity for diabetes. So that's one of the things you have to worry about. I don't have to worry about it. Diabetes. I don't have any diabetes in my family. None. Cancer, heart attacks, no diabetes. So it all depends on your gene structure as to what you need to worry
It's like
about.
they say, we are what we eat.
I'm sorry?
We are what we eat.
You are what you eat, but unfortunately, you can't eat the same thing that I can eat. Okay.
It's kind of like, I think it was in week 2, the beginning of the chapter, how it talks about the runner,
Right,
how he took care of himself, but even though he was really healthy,
right.
his family and his genes, they're
His dad died at 43 and he died at,
40, like 41 or something.
yeah, something like that.
So,
Yeah, and the picture, this perfect specimen died of a heart attack. Why? Was he snorting coke? No. No, he had it in his family, so he would accumulate cholesterol in his arteries of his heart. It was the way that his family was put together, just the way it works. You have some bodybuilders who, Arnold Schwarzenegger was Mr. Olympia, 5 years in a row or something. And here he is, he's in his 80s, I think he's in his 80s. Anyway, a lot of bodybuilders die in their 40s and 50s. They blow their kidneys out. They die of liver cancer because they shot up with steroids. Well, so did he. Arnold Schwarzenegger, everybody was shooting up with steroids at that time, but he's still alive. Different genetics, different body structure. It all depends. And that's one of the reasons why we were talking about African Americans and how they retain salt and therefore they have hypertension at a much higher level. Now the problem with hypertension is you can't feel it. You feel good actually because you can do things that other people can't do and you're always ready to go. But of course you got hypertension and you're going to kill yourself if you don't check your blood pressure and have the doctor bring it down a little bit.
So, like, just from your knowledge, like, Asians, do they, what kind of health issues do they tend to have?
When we smoke cigarettes, we pull the cigarette smoke down into our lungs. Asians tend to swallow the smoke, so it goes down into their stomachs. So they get stomach cancer a lot. When we drink alcohol, it causes all kinds of interesting problems, but they get stomach cancer from alcohol. What other problems do they have? They don't get lung cancer from tobacco, but they get stomach cancer. They actually live longer than I do, than Western men. But they have a healthier diet.
Well, that's why I was asking, because they do seem to eat a lot of just vegetables and meat.
Right,
And
right.
so, the only thing that I, like, from what I've observed is probably just the oil, so I was wondering if they have like a high cholesterol rate
No.
or,
No, the other thing that we see is that Italians and French eat a lot of really starchy foods. Now theoretically, they should die young, but they don't because they eat smaller portions. They eat olive oil, and olive oil, while it's an oil, it's still not as bad as eating any animal fat. So they eat small chunks of meat, you know, it's a lot smaller. They'll eat a lot of small meals. So they live longer. They drink red wine, which is actually good for you because it has all those antioxidants in it. Yeah. Anyway, I guess I'll see you guys next time.